Okay, this is my oral presentation on Talking and Testifying by Dr. Geneva Smitherman. I actually purchased this book back in 1993 at a conference I was at in Kansas City. And I've had it on my shelf for several years. I read it, and then I put it down. I picked it up, put it down. But now I had this opportunity to really sit down and kind of grapple with its concepts. And the initial questions answered by the text is historical context and development of the discussion around African American language. As early as 1959, scholars were having discourse about African American language and its function in the black community and the public space. Black speech patterns have been of interest for quite some time. I think the third thing that's interesting about this text is that black speech and education was in the process of changing, and it lists two significant phases of the study of contextualization. One was in 1954 when the Supreme Court ruling desegregated schools, Rosa Parks' refusal to get up and give up her seat, and then the emergence of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, followed by the Black Panther Movement. The second phase mentioned in the book is white America's attempt at dealing with this newly released energy by blacks. You have the Black Power movement, you've got the Black arts movement, you've got the Black theology movement. So all of these things are happening at one time. So therefore, voices of African Americans are coming to the forefront more so than it normally had been. Also, there is this new sociolinguistic studies on language and remediation efforts and attempt to teach black folk how to speak like white folk, i.e. trying to regulate standard American English as a norm for public conversation. Now, this happened in both arenas. There were blacks who were arguing that black people should speak like white folk, and then there were white folk who were arguing that successful black people should speak like white folk. The primary problem with this approach, though, was there was a lack of knowledge about black English and how it functioned within the confines of the black community. One of the key successes, I believe, of this book is that it identifies black English as a legitimate language that needed to be studied rather than condemned or dismissed because it may or might not follow the rules of what we call standard African American English. Smitherman defines black English as, and I quote, a dialect. Black English is a dialect of Africanized forms of English, reflecting black Americans' linguistic, cultural African heritage and the conditions of servitude, oppression, and life in America, end quote. She goes on to say, and I quote, that black language is Euro-American speech with an Afro-American meaning, nuance, tone, and gesture, i.e., she discusses this idea of style and language in one context. I think it's important to understand that as black people, we add style to everything, including our languages. The relevance of the book to the class, I think, is threefold. One, it demonstrates the long history of the study of black language and why the study was and is still important. Two, it reminds us of the role of race and racism as a regulatory tool of education and intellectual competency based on speech, linguistics, and public speech acceptability. And three, we are further reminded that the struggle continues. Reading this book and then reading Articulate While Black and listening to the statements by white pundits, newspaper commentators, government officials regarding the president's ability to converse cross-culturally, we are reminded that we ain't free yet, especially when it comes to linguistics. I think one other aspect we can look at, though, is that it also delineates the functions of black English. Black English connects language to style. Standard American English tends to be boring. Black English has a flair to it that constantly reveals itself as time and circumstances permit. Now, one of the questions it did not answer was, though the term nigger didn't become used until the 20th century as an epithet, and it didn't have the same kind of impotence. The question I have is, how did it shift? What was going on sociologically, economically, racially that made this shift in the way the term is used? I think one of the things that the book advances is the understanding of this week's topic is it reminds us of, one, the weakness of standard American English to capture all of the textures in Black English. 2, it once again demonstrates how fluid Black English is and its ability to shape gendered conversations and with style and conversion or coversion. And 3, i.e. the fake bitch video, which was very, very funny. And 3, I think that it helps us to, again, realize the need to continue to push the envelope when it comes to understanding the dynamics of what we call Black English. Now, if this book were revised, I'd be interested in learning if there is a fake bitch kind of communicative device among African American women who are not living in America. I should have said that wrong. The question is this fake bitch idea prominent in African languages? Do they do it in Jamaica? Would they do it in Senegal? Would it be done in Nigeria? Or does the context determine that? I think that would be a pretty interesting question. I'd also be interested in learning how younger African women relate to their elders when it comes to conversation. When I was growing up, young girls who came into a room where there were older women did not engage in conversation. That doesn't happen nowadays. Young girls walk in a room, mom's talking, she gets right to the conversation. So I wonder if those kinds of dynamics also exist. So, in conclusion, talking and testifying has opened a lot more ideas, and again, the historical dynamic of Black English. I think it is necessary for us to continue to push the envelope. I think that looking at this week's readings and the way that the scholars have discussed the role of women's conversation was important, and that's about it. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. Peace.